There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Rational Standard. It's a dark, cloudy, and cool day. That's my favorite type of day. This Friday finally helps my brain work much better than your traditional South African summer, where where you can't get anything done in the heat. But the change in weather has not changed our political and/or public policy and/or economic policy circumstances whatsoever. We are still in crazy mode in this first week of April of 2025. And I guess the headline story, at least in South Africa, well, geez, there are many, but I guess the big one is the impending slash potential slash inevitable collapse of the government of national unity. Just to provide some quick context, and then we can get into the conversation, is June 2024, Government of National Unity is formed as a coalition primarily between the ANC and the DA and most kind of opposition parties, with the exception of the EFF and MK. One of the key assumptions of a coalition government is that all the partners will support the head of government and, of course, the budget, because you need that for confidence and supply. So if you need it for that, you absolutely need it for a full bore coalition. Uh, we discussed the budgets for this year in previous episodes. Kind of first there was a big delay in the budget being tabled because there wasn't agreement amongst the Government of National Unity partners, and then ultimately the budget was tabled to much opposition from the EFF and MK and the Democratic Alliance, and of course some other small parties as well. But ultimately, yesterday, which was the 3rd of April 2012, all the I think the framework was tabled to Parliament and it was approved, primarily by the ANC, by the IFP, by Action South Africa. Although they said the Action SA and the ANC says that they did not support the budget. I don't know what that means, but it's been adopted.
Yeah, somehow there's even less agreement on the budget, and yet the budget has been passed.
Yes, yeah.
So
The funny thing
you've
is,
ended
like
up
on
in a
social media,
situation
everyone
where,
opposed the budget. Everyone opposed the budget, and yet,
Yeah,
and yet,
everyone.
yeah,
alas,
yeah.
but the parties that voted against the budget, very clearly against the budget, were EFF, MK, the DA, Freedom Front, I think, and the ACDP, and I think ATM. So at least two GNU partners, the DA and the Freedom Front, opposed the GNU's budget and voted with, I guess you could call it, the radical left in South Africa, being the EFF and MK. So it's a pig's breakfast, really, to put it bluntly. But ultimately now I think there's consensus. I think that's my submission, that the GNU is going to collapse. I think there's some holdouts, but I think the press sees the writing on the wall. I think the president has made it clear that this is not acceptable to him. I've spoken to people in the DA. They want out. I don't think everyone in the DA wants out. That's definitely not the case. But to me, if I were a betting man, I would bet that soon, I don't want to put a date on it, soon the GNU is going to dissolve, or at least the Democratic Alliance and the Freedom Front, I guess, will be leaving the GNU, and that means it's going to have to be reconfigured in some way. That's my thinking. But Morné, chaos, absolute utter chaos. What do you make of
Yeah,
this?
I think that talking about the political chaos at the moment, it's almost sort of a competition in the whole world where, every time one particular country thinks that they're being absolutely ridiculous, and it's there's competition from all the other countries saying no, we can up that. I don't like this constant competition for who can be the most unreasonable and who can be the most silly in the way that they're operating. I think that if we had to guess, I think if I had to put it on an over under, if you ask me, do I think it's more likely or not that within a week's time we're still going to have a GNU? I'd say I don't see us having a GNU, or at least the GNU as it currently is constituted by this time next week. It has come to a head, and the question is just who's going to be the first one to actually pull the trigger here. I did very much think that the DA were at the point where they were going to do it from their side, but it has sort of been the story of the GNU that the DA doesn't do very much from their side. So it does make sense that they say, no, we're putting our lot in with the ANC, and we're comfortable with having them make all the decisions and not really interfering too much. So that would be very much in line with what we've seen so far. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, you can't really have a coalition if you're not willing to agree on a budget. You can't really have a coalition when the second largest party of the coalition has now launched its second legal challenge to the government's actions, and expect that you're going to stay in any kind of, whether you call it a government of national unity or a coalition or anything. You can't really expect that. And yeah, it's interesting, Martin, what you said, the fact that we're very, see the comments, somebody's just highlighting the fact that I apparently didn't get the memo to wear my blue checkered shirt today.
But, we left you out. We did not CC you.
Yeah, so I feel like I've been left out of some sort of internal discussion here, and I'm about to be relieved of my position in the rational standard conversation. But but yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it was, like you said, inevitable. I think it was always going to be very difficult, and the ANC has been playing hardball. And up to this point, there's still not really been any big concession. This would have been the first concession from the ANC's side, and it's clear that they're just not willing to do even the smallest bit of bargaining when it comes to their agenda. So it's going to be interesting to see where we go now. I think that there is an interesting sort of realignment. I think the overall anti-ANC trend is increasing even more. I think that that's becoming more of a priority now than it had been previously. I could even see people who are not ideologically aligned becoming, coalescing around that, just the anti-ANC sentiment. And, if there is an end to the GNU, what I'd like to see is the pursuit of a motion of no confidence. Just because I think there's actually the votes there. I think that you've got the votes to get a majority to say that they don't have confidence in the president. And I just more chaos. That's what I like. I say just ramp it up while we're busy. Let's just go for broke here.
Do you agree that more chaos is better?
I'm a proponent of spontaneous order and everything. So I will never be opposed to to new horizons, right? But just from an interest perspective, right? We are in uncharted territory, as Morné said. If there's a motion of no confidence that actually gets to pass, which there is a possibility, really, right? Given the fact that even people who aren't ideologically aligned would just be willing to deal a blow to the ANC politically just by voting against their president. So that to me is interesting. I'm a legal head. I want to see legal situations that I only read about in hypotheticals happen in real life. So that is just from a conceptual standpoint, super interesting. But yeah, concerning the GNU itself, right? It is interesting, right? I don't bet. I find gambling to be, But if I were a betting man, I wouldn't be as confident. I think there's self-interest, as I always say, to me guides everything. So what are all the parties who are currently in the GNU self-interested in, right? Like, what was their reason for getting into the GNU? It was, I think, right, to influence governmental decisions. And I look at a minister like Usiviwe in the Department of Basic Education, and she would is the DA willing? Because if the GNU collapses, I said, it will be reconstituted in another manner, I think, or we'll just have confidence in supply, as you would have liked, Rona Martin. But it isn't as clear cut to me. But the fact that it came to a point where the DA was like, no, on the budgets, as like in my previous talks, as we had that major talk, I think in North was last year, I mentioned that like the budget was where the big balls were gonna have to be for the DA. And it seems like they got them. It seems like they were like, no, we can't. This is a true line. And I'm glad that it is. But a part of me, and this is a very cynical part of me, thinks that even though this was seen to be a line, and as Morné has said, this would be a second legal challenge, meaning there was a legal challenge, meaning there was a line that was passed and the GNU still persisted. And this is something that is pretty unfortunate. So there's a very cynical part of me that is like, man, in as much as there's a legal challenge launched against the budget, also such interesting things that you can challenge the state's fiscal framework. This is great stuff, right? Like, but yeah, from a just a legal perspective. But the fact that there's a second legal challenge does not necessarily mean that it will not happen. Like the GNU will collapse. Like the budget has passed, and I think DA ministers are still holding their posts that they are holding. Of course, politically, there's a whole lot of things happening, but are they willing to let go of those posts? That is the fundamental question to me, which should be very interesting because I'm not trustworthy of politicians. I trust certain ones more than I do others, but on the general, really, I wouldn't say they're trustworthy people. So I don't think that it will collapse, but it looks like it will. And that is exciting, whilst also pretty because like in the normal sense of you just don't know what the future will bring. But personally, it is truly exciting. Like we live in interesting times, the worst and best of times.
Yeah, no, I was saying before the call that I just want to go kind of live in some hut in the Faroe Islands or something where nothing ever happens. That's my preference in life. I know I'm a very engaged guy, but if I had to choose, I would choose for to live in more uninteresting times. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, for me, kind of some of the unresolved. I mean, we had a conversation last week, I think, or the week before on kind of the budget and some of the questions around it. And for me, like the big one is the DA is making a big boo-hi about kind of, oh, we oppose the budget, we oppose that, and that's cool, and I agree. The fact is, all policy matters in this country by convention, at least since, geez, I don't know, maybe since the union was established, or at least since the constitution was adopted, the current one, is that the cabinet has to approve a policy matter for any department. Like, yes, there's some small things that ministers can just do, but if it's a big thing, then the cabinet has to give its approval. And the budget is the biggest thing as far as
That's
policy is
true.
concerned. I think there's four bills that make out the budget, the appropriations bill and a few others. No new legislation can be tabled in Parliament, at least by convention, without Cabinet's approval. Since June of 2024, Cabinet voluntarily subjected itself to a framework whereby it required sufficient consensus of all the parties involved, which is about 60% of those represented in Parliament, to approve any new bills. That, according to my calculations and according to many others' calculations, is that at least the DA and the ANC must say yes, yes, cool, go ahead, before anything can go to Parliament. Now, my question is, how did Enoch Gorongwana, how the hell was he able to drag these bills into the parliamentary chamber? Like, this should have been impossible for him to do unless the DA sat in cabinet and they said, cool, proceed, go ahead. Like, if they did not say proceed, go ahead, then the minister has acted without the confidence of cabinet. So to me, that's a big unanswered question that's just hanging kind of in the air, where you have this rogue minister of finance who just kind of went and did his own thing. On the one hand, I like that. I'm like, cool. So that means the other ministers can now also then, I guess, just kind
Do
of
their
do
own
what they
thing.
want without the confidence of cabinet. And to me, then I'm like, cool. Then the DA must stay in the GNU, and then it must just say, cool. So Enoch set the standard. The president did not fire him after he acted unilaterally. So cool. That's now the go ahead. So as Minister of Public Works, Dean McPherson, I'm now going to say, cool, no more expropriations. Done. It's over. like not for anything. There is not going to be an expropriation for anything in this country again, or at least while I'm here. The Minister of Home Affairs, Maseko, we're a liberal party, kind of DA. We believe in free movement and kind of so on. So if you want to come to South Africa, like the visa rules are suspended. Like just pitch. You're here. Cool. You're in. And I mean, Siwiwe Garuba, she can just say, cool. Any idea of kind of school governing bodies, their discretion being limited? No. In terms of the Basic Education Amendment Act, I am giving school governing bodies complete control, like complete control. I have the discretion as the minister, so Sikfiat, school governing bodies can now do whatever they want in their schools. That is the precedent that I've seen. But okay, that's the question, I guess, that's open. Like, whether sufficient consensus. But then the other thing is, Zakes, I think you're right. There is this thing about self-interest. And from my understanding of what's happening behind the scenes is that the DA executive caucus, call them that, generally wants it to stay. They want the GNU to stay, and this was the same with the NP in the first GNU. The executive caucus wanted to stay. They didn't want it to break up. And that's, I mean, I'm not gonna blame them for that. I think that's rational. But I do want to blame the DA for that, because surely knowing how the NP operated in the first GNU, like with the minister saying, no, we have to stay because nice office and privilege and prestige, surely that must have been a lesson that if you are going to represent our party in government, you must relieve yourself of party position. You are now a card-carrying member of the party in the government, but you're not going to decide whether we stay in the government anymore. The party must make that decision. So clearly there is an issue here about where the people with the conflict of interest are also making the decision for whether the party stays or leaves. Now, I think that they're going to be outvoted. I genuinely think that it's going to be very difficult for the DA to press back against the wave of consensus that I would say that the ANC shares, that their new coalition partners or potential coalition partners in Action SA shares. I think the press is very clear on this, and I think political analysts just generally understand that you cannot continue as a government under such circumstances as we have now. And I think even Ramaphosa, it puts his position, a big question mark over his position, but I think it would be very difficult for him to not fire the DA out of cabinet, because these are ministers in his government and they're also members of parliament who voted against his budget. I mean, I cannot underemphasize that. These are the government, these are people who serve at the pleasure of the president who voted against the president's budget. So that's significant, or it would otherwise be significant in a normal parliamentary republic, I guess. So yeah, again, I think just the weight of these circumstances mean that the GNU necessarily will collapse, even if the DA doesn't want it. I think they'll be compelled to, either by their own party or by the ANC. That's my thinking right now. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I agree. Let's do a motion of no confidence. I know there's a potentially big cost to that, because we don't know what happens the day after the motion of no confidence. But whatever we have now is simply not tenable. I mean, I think we're going to discuss the international dimension later, but there's so much going on in South Africa right now that I'm not sure that our economy and our political infrastructure can withstand without harm. I think we're gonna be harmed now, and I think we need to bring this situation to a head. We need to have a resolution to the question of, are we going to stay in this uncertain environment, or are we going to have certainty on policy and government? And I think a motion of no confidence is at least a potential step towards certainty. Might be a step in the other direction, but it's something that I think has to be tried. I think it's South Africa is at a crossroads now, at the very least. Morné?
Yeah, I think that Yeah, there's sort of two different things. On the one hand, like Zake said, there's a question of trust, and that's, can you trust people? And then there's a question of certainty, and that's, are you certain whether or not you can trust them? And I mean, in the past, we've sort of had, not very much trust, but there was quite a bit of certainty, at least, prior to, I think, Ramaphosa, and maybe even in particular the second Ramaphosa / GNU policy areas, that in the past we had certainty that policy was going to look a particular way, it was going to develop in this particular format, and even though it was bad policy, you knew it was coming. So in a lot of cases, certainty regarding fairly bad policy can be better than uncertainty, even if that does mean good policy in the long run. So that's the one thing. I'm not sure whether a motion of no confidence necessarily gets you to more certainty. I just think that the current situation it's just not tenable. You just can't keep it going. We have a GNU in name only. And everything we've said so far, we've got a GNU built on the principle of sufficient consensus, which has not been evoked at any stage. Based on the principle that budgets will be accepted, which has not happened at any stage. So I don't think we have a GNU as it is. Other than the fact that people get to change their social media and they get to attend events and they get the blue car brigades and things, I'm not sure how you actually get to calling this government of national unity, because there has been no compromise from any party on anything. There's just been a recognition that we can't fight it, so let's just not fight. But it hasn't really been the case that we could stop you, but we're willing to concede on this particular matter. And it was never going to last, and it can't last unless there's a very, very serious change now, which I don't think is forthcoming. And I don't think it's in the interest of either the DA or the ANC to keep it going. I think it might be in the interest of certain people in the DA, maybe even certain people in the ANC, but certainly not for the parties as a whole. Nobody is really benefiting from the current situation. I think in the past it was maybe slightly to the benefit of the ANC, whereas now I don't see it really benefiting anyone. And there's an interesting point you've actually mentioned, Martin, about the whole fact that it's a sort of a weird situation where normally you have the principal and you have the agent, and the principal sends out the agent to act on their behalf. And in this case, in the DA at least, there's been this weird thing where the principal and the agent were the same people. They were the ones. You had the leadership in the DA, and they said we should go into the cabinet and act as agents of the DA, and will also be the principals that are in charge of determining whether or not we stay and determining whether or not we're doing a good job. So clearly that doesn't work for the DA either. But yeah, I think that just to bring it back to the budget, what's your sense, either of your senses, about the court case itself? I think we did talk about the Expropriation Act, and I think they have a fairly good case there, or at least a case that's has a fairly good chance of succeeding, and actually having the act sent back to Parliament. In this case, it seems pretty flimsy. So, I mean,
could you just elaborate? Can you just elaborate briefly on what it is that they're actually submitting to court?
Yeah, well, it's two things. The one thing is the process being followed, but the main, which might have some substance, but I don't think it's enough for a court to really find in their favor. And the other one is actually not unique to our current situation. It's actually related to the minister's power to change VAT of his own accord, and the cabinet to make changes to VAT without necessarily having legislative input or the input of the legislature. And geez, I just don't, it doesn't seem to me like that gets you to a court saying, okay, I mean, they might find a particular section of the VAT Act to be unconstitutional, which I
That's
don't
what I was thinking.
think is as likely. But even if they do, they've already got the majority of Parliament voting for the act. So I think you could quite easily, the judge could say, sure, that that particular provision needs to be reworked. So it's unconstitutional to the extent that it allows for X, Y, and Z. Here, Parliament needs to amend the Act in order to clarify the fact that the minister can propose it, but it has to be approved by Parliament. And in either case, and I think that's why you've seen most of the private businesses, and everybody's gotten SMSs and emails and all sorts of things, that that's gone up, even though technically there is a court challenge. But I think for the most part, you can pretty much accept that it's going to go up. At least that's my interpretation of the current court challenge, is that I don't see it succeeding, and I don't see its success leading to VAT not going up, despite the fact that we started this program with saying that somehow the ANC and the DA and the Action Society, they're all against the VAT going up, and yet somehow it went up of its own accord. It's a sort of the VAT monster that's just acting on its own without the input. That should be unconstitutional, because having these taxes act on their own without having control of
automatic
over the executive or anybody.
Zach, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no. Like I do, the political discussion has been interesting surrounding vets, because we all know that the ANC passed it, right? So it seems it seems very crazy to me that they'd even intimate saying that they are opposed to vets increasing when their minister is the one who drafted a bill that increased vets. So that to me just seems weird. And like earlier on the points about what Morné said about what Martin and what Morné added on uncertainty, right? And uncertainty. And even though I'm interested in a vote of no confidence, because I really want to see every legal thing happen in real life. So, that'd be cool to see the outcome of it, right? It is, of course, a possibility, because the ANC no longer, in the past, it was just never going to happen as long as the ANC had 50%, right, of the legislature. Now it no longer does, so it makes it a possibility. But the fact that the ANC was able to pass its fiscal framework, right, to effectively increase VAT, even though it still did not have, a 50%, even though the EFF, MK, and the DA did not vote for it. I think that is a point to the ANC. And I think that if a vote of no confidence were to happen, we might be surprised in the ANC coming out of it way stronger, and every other party, at least that tried to initiate it, coming out of it much more weaker, right? We've already seen that Action SA is willing to betray everyone who voted for it. I guess they are willing to do that. They're willing to just support things that are pretty horrible for the broader public. I don't know for what benefits, right? And they're doing this weird thing of saying that they did not vote for an increase to VAT, and I guess everyone across the country is just crazy, and we are seeing things. Oh man, seeing Uncle Troleb over the past 2 days has been amazing stuff. His interview on Newsroom Africa is one of the best things I have seen in a while by a politician, because the gymnastics he was doing were pretty amazing. But yeah, it still though, the ANC are political animals, in that their policies are horrible, but politically they are great actors. And I think this passing of VAT, horrible as it is, it shows us that. And it is quite unfortunate. And then concerning the legal challenge, right, Morné, man, I love legal challenges because they make lawyers money. Even though the prospects of said legal challenges not being that high, or at least the prospect of success. I think maybe with I haven't looked at the specifics. I haven't looked at their heads, if they are really available. But it would be interesting to see what argument they are angling at regarding a process. As Martin said, there's a huge question hanging up in the air, right? And saying that here is a minister who, if the DA, it's either the DA said yes to the initial bill that went to parliament, which is highly unlikely, meaning they didn't, meaning that the ANC minister acted in contradiction to at least an voluntary established process that they agreed to in having sufficient consensus. But if that is not the angle, and you are shaking your head, it's not. So yeah, if that is not the angle, then I don't know really how the process aspects of it would be successful. But I think that is the best aspect of it. The Vet Act amendment to me just seems like a non-starter. I don't know, like, because the ANC can just table an amendment in parliament, and like all the parties who voted for the fiscal framework will just vote for the amendment, or will just vote for the new budget that is not passed through the Vet Act. It is, yeah, it is interesting, the legal challenge itself. As I said, I love legal challenges though, because I get to read some interesting cases and like all these legal arguments that are being made. But yeah, and concerning like the overall GNU, whether it stays or not, right? Like, as I said, self-interest. But as both of you, I would agree, right, that like if there's no consensus on a budget, which is pretty much the basis upon which the government of national unity will function for the coming at least year, right? Then what do we have? What do we truly have? We have nothing. We just have a bunch of people who agreed at one point that they'll give each other ministerial positions, and that is about it. So yeah, I think in that regard, right, it is looking very untenable. But the thing is that like its reconstitution may not, I think, may bring about the certainty that Morné spoke about, that like you'll be certain that bad policy will come because it'll be the certainty of the ANC. Because I think that the ANC is able to get, it will be able, if one of the parties like Action SA is like, oh, I mean, we are committing political suicide, maybe, because it looks like they are, but they are comfortable with it. But if they think that, no, it's too much now, and they move away, the ANC, I think, can get any one of the parties who are ideologically opposed to one another but are opposed to it by making some form of concession or promising to make said concession. It's just that the other two parties in MK and the EFF who really could provide it, but I guess there will be others who maybe will be willing to take concessions. But the two major ones are great political actors too, having come from the ANC, which is why they were unwilling to go into the GNU, which is why they have been voting against the ANC, because I think they understand what the ANC is really about in pushing its own agenda, right? Like the DA, and I commend the DA for doing that. They are still willing to negotiate. And look, as I will always say, the fact that we have a DA minister in basic education and the amazing work that she has been doing there and in other spaces, right? Like, I'm like, that is good and overall good. So even looking back, I don't think the DA should feel a certain way. Of course, certain members of the panel would disagree with me, but I don't think they should feel bad about them having joined the GNU, even though it is looking like it is untenable. I like the fact that like they said no to the budget. They stood on business. That is a good thing.
Finally.
I let them the most important business. Because every other business had been passed. We must remember this, that like every other legislation had been passed.
Leave your formalism and your formalistic positivistic analysis at the door.
It isn't formalism. It is actually substantive legislation that was sitting at the president's desk that had been passed by the legislature.
You could have sat on it. You could have sat on it for the next decade.
And then that creates another interesting. I want to possibly see that creates another interesting, like, situation. What happens? Can the president disregard the will of the legislature by just simply delaying the entire thing, right? Like, these are great legal questions, by the way. So I would like to see that happen. But we should not act like the DA was in the GNU in parliament. You see, right now there was a new law that was passed, that was supposed to be passed, and they voted against it. That is good. That is good. And I'm no DA fan, if anyone really knows me on a personal level. But in this match, I'm willing to give them credit because they are standing for good things in the face of a crazy political climate. But yeah, I don't think, I think the ANC may come out of this much more stronger. We would like for it to come out much more weaker. As Martin said, the crossroads, I don't like talking in terms of crossroads because usually when it comes to all or nothing things, like the ANC comes out good, looking good, due to their maneuverability, at least given the current context. I don't think that if it comes to a crossroads and there's a vote of no confidence, Cyril Ramaphosa won't be president. Instead, he will be president with a much more stronger footing, now with no one in his ear who's saying, maybe don't do that. And then we have a 2% VAT increase next year and a 10% increase to the public service wage bill or some shit like that. Some stuff
Yeah.
like
So
that.
look, for me, it's not.
It's like Gustavo is now also part of the. So,
So look, for me, so there's a few questions. So I think let me the legal challenge thing firstly. I agree. I think it's not gonna go anywhere. I think ultimately whether the minister has a big power or not to kind of act unilaterally, the fact is Parliament approved it. Ultimately, Parliament approved it. So if this is an academic challenge to the minister's power to say that actually he could, in theory, if he wanted to, just willy-nilly raise VAT and the act allows him to, then I think cool, the DA probably has a case, and then it should make that case. But to pretend like that is relevant to this budget in particular, I think is a bit of a stretch. And I think the DA probably knows this. I think the DA just wants to show we're really fighting this thing, and I like it. I like it a lot. I like you, Zakes. I think it's wonderful. I do think ultimately they'll win. They'll lose the case, and the court might entertain some of it, but ultimately I don't think this is the way to thwart the budget. Parliament approved the budget. I mean, that needs to be at this stage after, like you said, Afo Trollop really humiliating and Herman Mashaba really humiliating themselves in the most spectacular ways on TV, on social media. I mean, it's it's those 5 stages of grief, and you could see they go through all of them in such a public fashion about, oh goodness me, what the hell did we do? But yeah, ultimately they voted in favor of it. It's approved. The budget is now the budget. That is it is the if you can point to one reason why Parliament exists as an institution, and I think Morné, you previously alluded to this on the show, is it controls the purse. Parliament is effectively sovereign when it comes to controlling the state's finances, and the courts are going to be very, very reluctant to get involved in any way, shape, or form in that. And as far as the courts are concerned, as far as law is concerned, yesterday the South African Parliament approved the budget, so it's. I think that's done. We can cry about it, but it's done for now, at least until the next budget, or at least until the government collapses and then a new government says we're going to table a new budget. That could also happen, I guess. Um, but yeah, so the legal challenge, that's the one thing. But related to that, and Jakes, I think this is an interesting point, and I guess people will disagree with me on this, but I don't necessarily think that a motion of no confidence process that ends up somehow in the ANC being strengthened is necessarily a bad thing. I think that we brought the ANC below 50%. It was beat in an election decisively, and the ANC has shown that under circumstances where its position of power is not certain, I mean, clear, I guess, it will absolutely destroy everything. It will immediately sign into law NHI around that election. It will immediately sign into law Bella. It will immediately sign into law EWC, and forget about all of that. It will stand on the international stage and try, and of course fail, to give the United States a bloody nose. That is going to cost us all very dearly, but the ANC seems to me to be very happy and content to do this. And I think this is a cornered dog acting out. And I mean, ideally, under ideal circumstances, what I would have wanted to see, and I've kind of spoken about this before, I've written a lot about it, is the ANC is under 50%, its coalition partners or the opposition forces it to realize it has lost the election, not pleads with it, not says, oh, please, goodness me, you lost the election, please realize it, takes tangible action to ensure that the ANC acts in accordance with that reality. It won't, it hasn't, forget about it. It's not going to happen. So if we come out of a process for a vote of no confidence where Ramaphosa is able to kind of get Action SA and all these other parties on side, and out of that there is clarity that at least for the next term the ANC is effectively a 50% party, effectively in practice a 50% party, then I would say for the next parliamentary term, we're okay. We are okay. There's no risk of EFF, MK. The DA is back in the opposition. We're basically back to the status quo antebellum. We're back to where we were a year ago, 2 years ago. It's cuck. Like it's a managed decline. It's terrible, but it's better than this constant uncertainty about whether the country will collapse at any second. Like if we can get back to that, then the ANC feels less cornered. Then it might approach the US and say, okay, let's deal. Sorry about what we said a month ago, but let's kind of try and reach some kind of conclusion on this. I don't think that's possible under the current circumstances. I also don't think what I've just described is likely. I don't think Ramaphosa is that good of a political actor. I think that there are other people in the ANC making these calculations for him, but I think ultimately the guy is a kind of an empty suit. So I don't think this is going to happen. But if that is the outcome of a
I
vote
don't
of no
know.
confidence, I'll take it. And then just the last thing is I don't want listeners who haven't been following the budget process to be completely in the dark here. So just kind of very briefly, I want to try and summarize what happened. And that is that Action SA, okay, everyone is against the VAT increase. Everyone is against the VAT increase. No one wants a VAT increase. Alas, the Minister of Finance proposed a VAT increase. The DA was vocal against it. Action SA was very vocal against it. The EFF and MK were very vocal against it. So now this goes to a finance committee in Parliament that has to kind of pre-approve the budget. So before it goes to the plenary session. Around this time, the ANC or Action SA seem to have been convinced that if they say we oppose VAT, but we will conditionally approve the framework in general, uh, that's okay. Then it can go ahead, and we won't get VAT, and we won't get an income tax bracket increase. Now, from all the press reports, and even the EFF is being remarkably sensible on this online. I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth, but they have, like, their representatives on that committee have kind of set out everything very clearly, and effectively there's also recordings of the Action SA guy in that committee being completely woodwinked about how things work. And somehow he was convinced, the party was convinced, that if you make a recommendation for VAT to be reconsidered and for personal income tax bracket creep to be reconsidered, then that is binding. It is not binding. The reality is the Action SA caucus voted in favor of the fiscal framework, including the VAT increase and including the income tax bracket creep. They voted in favor of that, and now there's some process over 30 days where they're going to chat to the minister about how bad VAT is, and that's fine. That'll all happen. But the budget is adopted, and then in Parliament yesterday. The idea was, okay, Action SA has now discovered it, it's realized its mistake, and now finally it'll vote against the budget, because really this was very close. The vote was close. There was a 9 or 10 vote difference. So this is unprecedented, really, in general in South African parliaments. It's a very close vote. But Action SA was convinced, no, our recommendations are binding. As we sit here right now, they're still on Twitter saying that there is no VAT increase. Don't worry, relax. We staved off the VAT increase, so don't worry about it. So they are really committed to this thing, and they voted in favor of the budget. And part of the DA's case, and I this is why I really think that the DA is doing this as a PR move, which is fine. I'm not criticizing them for that, but it's in their papers. They're making a big story about how Action SA was misled and Parliament was misled, and actually Parliament didn't understand what it is voting on, and in fact we accidentally adopted the budget. Kind of, it comes down to that. The court is not going to accept that. Parliament cannot act by accident. So this is kind of the story, how we got to this budget. Now there's a question, and I've been debating people about this. Uh, did Action SA really make a mistake? Were they really out of their depth? Or, and this is, I think there might be an element of this. Do they really want to get into the GNU? Are they desperate for ministerial posts and they have decided this is how we're going to do it? We are going to be against that in theory and in public, but we are going to find some way to contrive ourselves into voting in favor of that, and then impress the ANC, and then engineer a collapse or just an exit from the GNU of the DA, and us kind of taking, I think Mashaba has his eyes on the Home Affairs Ministry, and Action SA going in there and taking over the DA spot in the GNU. They don't have enough. If the DA leaves, they're going to have to find some other votes as well. But I'm actually not sure about this myself. I just think that yes, you have to be really, really dumb, really stupid to make a mistake like this when all of your advisors and everyone is telling you you do not understand what you're voting on. Please do not do that, and then you still do it. I mean, you would have to be very stupid. It would take some convincing for it to convince me that Action SA really just didn't understand what they were doing because people were telling them what's happening. So yeah, it's an open question. Morné, I see you have some
Yeah,
points.
to me, it's the. I mean, what was the main criticism of the DA back when was the Zuma presidency? Was that they have no policies and they have no principles other than being anti-Zuma. And I think that you can sort of say the same thing about Action SA, is that they don't really have much depth to them other than they are an anti-DA party now. So they're sort of driven by, you know, whatever is worst for the DA is best for us, is best for the country, is because, I mean, Herman was sort of slighted by the DA some time ago. And I really think that's about as deep as it goes. I think that's how far the calculus is actually going at the moment, is that Action SA, I think, sees itself as a party that can be the new official opposition kind of thing, and that they think they could do a better job of it than the DA has been doing. And I think that's really as far as it goes. I think that they do whatever they think is going to do the most damage to the DA. And you can sort of see it in the DA's reaction as well, is they're very, very vehement in their comments regarding Action SA. And, you know, it goes both ways in this case. But yeah, so that's clearly a party against party kind of fight. And yeah, and you know, we're going to have to see. I don't think the analysis goes deeper than that. I do think that you know, they're still sort of very hesitant to enter into the GNU, or to confirm that they'd go into the GNU. I think that if the ANC could say, you get the DA's place and we can form a GNU without them, then they'd be on board. Certainly, I don't see them saying no to that at all. I haven't actually looked at the figures, but I think that they should be able to do it. I did do a calculation to see whether the DA could do a GNU without the ANC, and yes, that's also possible. It's actually just the DA, MK, EFF. There's your doomsday coalition. IFP, and you've got it. That's actually 201. So you can get a majority with just those four. And
but without the DA,
you know,
the ANC will need either MK or the EFF at least, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to check that again. But yeah, I think just on the ANC point, Martin. Then sorry, Zax, I'll give you the opportunity. I think that people have been really overrating the ANC's political maneuvering in general, and I think you've seen that now recently. So maybe it was the case that they were fairly, you know, savvy political operators at a time, and I do actually think it was the case. And I think that there still are people in the ANC who are quite clever in these sorts of Machiavellian machinations. But I think that you see now, when they really come under pressure, they actually tend to act quite irresponsibly. And that's where they are now, is you see them sort of lashing out, and you see them, you know, just doing absolutely ridiculous things that don't benefit either the ANC or the people in the ANC or the country as a whole. And I think the faster you can get that sorted out, the better. So that's just on the policy certainty side. But yeah, it's clear that we don't have the most savvy political operators in place at the moment. It's clear that, you know, once they feel threatened, they are prone to act, you know, fairly unpredictably, and also, you know, fairly harmfully. And that's why I think that if there were a vote of no confidence, I'm not sure if Ramaphosa could get a majority of the ANC's support in a vote of no confidence. I think there's a fairly good chance that you know, a large proportion of the ANC would actually vote against them, because they are also repositioning themselves as, you know, they are going to be the post Ramaphosa party at the end of this term, regardless of what happens. So, and yeah, I think a lot of people are still mad at Cyril for forming the GNU with the DA. But yeah, so I think there are still a lot of questions. But on the action essay, I think it's fairly clear. I think you saw it in Swane. That's why Silius Brink isn't in the head of Swane anymore. It's because action essay just don't like the DA. And I mean, the DA aren't immune to this either. That's, I mean, they have the same sort of stance against the PA. Never wanting to work together with them. But and I think that's also something we have to say, is that the DA have also not acted brilliantly all the time. I mean, do you remember something called the Moonshot Pact? That didn't last very long. Do you remember years of saying we'll never go into a coalition with the ANC? That certainly didn't last very long. So let's not pretend that it's, you know, one set of very unreliable, very you know, whatever, deceitful actors and a bunch of angels.
And a bunch of angels, yeah.
Yeah, that certainly isn't the case. It's politicians all the way down, which means the worst people among us. Sorry, Zakes.
That's true. No. The last part was quite true. The worst among us, indeed. But yeah, man, like I think both to your and Martin's point, I think, you know, in as much as, particularly concerning the ANC and their current leader right now, Ramaphosa, I want us to understand that, like, what the ANC considered one of the greatest political maneuverers was Mr. Jacob Zuma, who ousted Thabo Mbeki, who's considered one of the greatest ANC leaders, right? Like, really, he's up there in terms of impact and just in general competence. And in terms of his smart, I guess you would assume to be able to outmaneuver a guy who was not educated in Jacob Zuma. Cyril outmaneuvered Jacob Zuma. So much so that he threw him in jail, made him found his own party that is currently still not in government. Not only that, Cyril has outmaneuvered every political opponent within the ANC. He had a scandal whereby he was pretty much prima facie guilty of something. Whatever, he was guilty of something, right? And it was even much more clearer than whatever I think Jacob Zuma has been accused of, right? And he's still president. Not only that, it is just brushed off, forgotten about.
Well, yeah.
It isn't even the biggest horrible thing he has done, and he's still here, right? And even though you may disagree, like objectively, the man seemingly dodges bullets like he's Neo. This is what he does. And
one thing which I really don't, I mean,
okay, cool, Morné, you can go through.
One thing which I don't get, that there isn't more of a you know, uproar about it, is the fact that what is it, the final version of the Zondo report, or the final findings of the Zondo report, Cyril Ramaphosa actually held that back. Held it back not only from public view, but held it back from the NPA. The National Prosecuting Authority has not been allowed access to the final findings of the Zondo report, which, yeah. I mean, how is that not the biggest story ever? It's like, here you have the Zondo report. It's supposed to address, you know, the scourge of state capture, the lost decade, the, you know, the worst thing since apartheid. And we're just going to say, let's not big bonds. Let's all just write that one down as a oopsie daisy, and then we'll go on.
And then we'll move on. And that's the guy, right? You're like, man, even though that's why I always, like, even though I agree with what Martin says in that he does not at least take certainly strong decisions concerning the strength of the country, at least good ones, right? But I disagree with Martin's take, and some of your take, Morné, that this man cannot maneuver. This man is, to me, right, one of the greatest political maneuverers, for lack of a better term, that we have seen post 94. And we will be saying that should the vote of no confidence pass, and should he come out as president and pretty much do what he has been managing to do throughout his entire presidency, or even before that, right? Like this ability to like just shift and always end up looking good. That has to count for something. And this is like, just imagine what Morné said. If Mr. Jacob Zuma had just kept a report that was investigating corruption to himself, the entire media would have lost its mind. We would have had marches again with, people saying Zuma must fall again, right? But we have listed multiple things that he has done, and he seemingly is not catching even political heat. And within the ANC, the two, like, man, what he's doing, right? I'm sure you're aware of the reconstitutions of PECs in Gauteng, in Free State, and in KZN. Those are the three provinces that looked like they were opposed to him. One is the home base of Ismail Ashule, one is the home base of Panyaza Lusufi, who did the whole we are not going to do a GNU in the province, and then the other is the home base of MK. He is doing this currently, right now, as the president, reconstituting the PECs, which are the executive structures of the ANC in those provinces, meaning he is pretty much purging anyone who may not agree with him. He even got Panyaza Disupi in Gauteng, right? Because what can he do, right? If the NEC says that you should reconstitute your PEC, then you should reconstitute your PEC. And now Panyaza Disupi, I think he shares the chairperson spot with someone else who I would assume is aligned with Mr. Ramaphosa. So his machinations, right? I don't think what Morné said, that people in the ANC, that won't happen. I don't think that the people in the ANC will vote against him, because what I gauge whenever I talk to people in the ANC, and these are people who would consider themselves fairly high ranking, right, in the organization, it is the understanding of why they don't like MK so much is that it broke the ranks. It went outside of the mother body to try and solve its problems. Not only that, it did the unthinkable and voted and took votes away from the ANC, right? Something that the ANC does not believe in, right? They are like, nope, we vote and then we go fight in conference. If you are being attacked, we all coalesce, which is a very good strategy, right? Just on a general political sense. So I don't think that can happen. So it could, of course, it could. There are people who are opposed to Mr. Ramaphosa within the ANC, but I want us to understand that if you look at the machinations that have been happening post the elections, he has been kind of neutering them bit by bit. Someone has a court case here, another person gets the SIU, investigate him there, and before you know it, a bunch of these political opponents have court cases, they have to step down and all of these things. I'm like, man, I just from an objective level, you have to respect his political machination.
Yeah, I guess for me, I think he has a knack of, and you alluded to this, I think he has a knack of keeping his hands seemingly clean. So he has a way for things to happen and for him to seem uninvolved. And he's been doing this since the Zuma years. People kind of forget that he was directly involved in ESCOM's turnaround strategy, and kind of he was the head of the cadre deployment committee and everything. But somehow he gets it to a point where his hands seem clean. Now, my take on this has always been that he is a beneficiary of circumstances that might be to some degree under his control, but I think largely outside of his control. And I think that has a lot to do with Zuma, and that is that the country went through a traumatic period, the 9 or whatever wasted years, and for some reason the country thinks that that was the absolute low of post-apartheid South Africa. I think we're there now, but the chattering classes think it was in the past. Um, and coming out of that with a president that, I mean, Zuma laughed as people accused him of corruption. He stood in parliament and chuckled about it, and that people took that to be something of a slight. And coming out of that and having a president that is very charismatic, very kind of well spoken, who seemingly has clean hands, I think that is something that our society has jealously guarded and something that our society was desperate for. And to that degree, that's why the surveys and the kind of polling confirms that the ANC's history and its kind of post apartheid admirable work in rolling out electricity, building houses, none of that really matters. What matters is Cyril Ramaphosa. He is their strongest electoral tool. And I think the latest research shows that the ANC's vote share, if an election were to be held today, is slightly lower than what it was. So it's in the 30s. But if Ramaphosa is out of it, it's in the 20s.
Yeah.
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 And but without Ramaphosa, it's in the 20s. The ANC is done. Like without Ramaphosa, the ANC is kaput. And I think the ANC knows this. Even his opponents know this. And I think that to a large degree motivates why they have not just kicked him out or kind of taken severe action against him. I think that that protects him to a large degree. Now, one of the reasons again why I think he is weak is, so the GNU, Morné was asking about who benefits in the ANC. I think the biggest beneficiary of the GNU is Cyril Ramaphosa, because he has a weak partner in the DA that will allow him to do whatever he wants within a very, very kind of broad leeway. But if he had to go with someone else, and I think the math confirms that if there's another government that has to have the EFF or MK and others, that is the end of Ramaphosa, because they have Mashaba-like grievances against Ramaphosa that Mashaba has against the DA. So it's personal and it's deep, and they will want to get rid of Cyril Ramaphosa. So the only way for him to kind of function is to have the DA on his side. I think it's going to be very difficult now for him to play that game still after the DA rejected his budget. But if you wanted to convince me that Ramaphosa is a good political actor, you should have done that during the Gauteng negotiations for a provincial GNU. So the DA went to Ramaphosa, very strong rhetoric as always, and they say, if we don't get Gauteng, the deal is off. I remember it as clear as day. This is what they said: without a deal in Gauteng, Mr. Ramaphosa, and Ramaphosa couldn't get Panyaza Lesufi and his government to accommodate the DA. Like, you would think that the ANC would have gone into some Lehotla and they would have said, okay, Panyaza, we've made a decision. You're going to do this or you're out. But no, I remember how Ramaphosa and Zakhele were like, oh, yeah, we're kind of not going to get involved. Kind of a very weak kind of gesture. And maybe on the one hand, maybe they called the DA's bluff, which is probably close to reality, in that they knew the DA was bluffing and they wouldn't leave. Or Panyaza, who I think is a kind of sly and effective political actor, said, well, Mr. Ramaphosa, you really need to go fuck yourself, if we're really kind of being honest here. So leave
Being
me alone.
honest
I don't
about
want to see you. So that's it. I think if he was really a powerful politician, like a real smooth operator, like Jacob Zuma was, certainly, then he would have just said, Panyaza, I'm not going to debate this with you. We've decided to form a coalition of the DA. I don't want to hear about this. It's done. The decision has been made. There you go. But he couldn't. So I think Ramaphosa's staying power is our national trauma from Zuma's years, and the country's absolute kind of love for this empty suit, and the ANC recognizing that without Ramaphosa, our voters will abandon us in kind of epic proportions.
But,
And I think
but
that's
Martin,
why Ramaphosa is staying power.
well, that's what doesn't make sense to me, Martin, is that Ramaphosa is not going to be on the ballot in the next election. Maybe, well, in the municipal election, sure, but in the next national election, Ramaphosa will not be up for president because he can't be. So
No, but
you
he can
have to
still
start
be like
making
an
a
influential. He can still be an
figure.
influential party presence. He's not going to be the president. It's illegal, but he could still be campaigning for the ANC and all these things, which would
Definitely
still
will.
be a plus for kind of people who like the ANC because of Ramaphosa. I'm not saying that it's as powerful as him being president, of course not. But I think that kicking Ramaphosa out of the presidency and having this break with him, that will piss off a lot of people. But yeah, I get the point. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't understand why that's such a large part of the discussion. Whether Ramaphosa is going to stay in leadership or not, because he won't be the president after the next elections. If he is, something will have gone awry. I will concede to Zakes that he is a good political operator. If he's still the president in the next election. Let's see what's that. Rampara is a fence sitter, allowing others to fall for the chaos. He has achieved nothing because he has played people against themselves and flip-flops to serve his own personal agenda. Yeah, I think that's broadly right, and I think that's probably your argument, is that he's
my
sort of
argument is exactly that. My argument is that, man, like he's the quintessential politician. Like if you think the sliminess, the everything, what's the message right there from Chad's described, right? It's pretty much like he's willing to flip flop. Like back to Martin's point with the government of national unity, that was the first instance, right? That showed me that the ANC and the DA are just truly operating on different levels in this politics thing, because within the ANC, they were like, no, even though, the DA was like, no, give us Gauteng. The ANC was like, no, but we have a national unity. Didn't say anything about these provinces. And that is what Panyaza was saying to them. And my thinking is that, Martin, I don't think Ramaphosa wanted the DA to have Gauteng. I don't, if he wanted it, I think it would have happened, but it was a combination of two forces, right? Let me say it was two things. So there's this group, right, a faction of Gauteng that really would say it does not get along with Ramaphosa, but it isn't opposed to Ramaphosa, right? And this was shown in them being unwilling to go into a government of a government of provincial unity with the DA. Ramaphosa wants to placate that part of the ANC that is, as we all know, is not happy that the ANC is currently in a coalition with them, whilst also appearing to the DA as if our coalition is great. See, I'm doing something. Like a fence sitter, as the chat said. He was sitting on the fence, like, okay, DA doing something. And then to the ANC, I think it was probably to ANC in Gauteng, he probably told them, yeah, let's chill. Do. It's all good. It's all good. I'll handle this on this side, and we will deal with this internally as they are dealing with it internally right now by just reconstituting the entire provincial executive committee in Gauteng, right? So that those would be the consequences. And you say that is weakness. I don't think so. You keep on mentioning Mr. Zuma. He was outmaneuvered by Cyril Ramaphosa. Like you are talking about, like he was outmaneuvered by the man.
He would be in prison. He would be in prison if he was really outmaneuvered.
But that's the fact that he did, right? Like I want us to think the gravity of that. The former president of the ruling party in the ANC was taken to prison. Like the fact that even happened.
Yeah, but
man, let's not.
Didn't happen.
What we can do is underestimate this man.
He says he wasn't actually as strong. No, but you think that counts in his favor of his strengths. You think that is an argument in favor of Ramaphosa's strengths. But I think that that actually shows how much had to be marshaled to get rid of Zuma. Zuma did not have the media on his side. Zuma did not have many of the government institutions on his side, and yet he still sort of hung on, and he has the third largest political party in South Africa at the moment.
That is true.
Whereas Ramaphosa, take away the fact that he's sort of constructed in a lab to be exactly what a News 24 news editor wants in a president. Take that away from him, and I don't think he has much. I think that his main asset that he has is that he looks very appealing to the media, and he looks very appealing to business leaders and those sort of people. But take that away from him, and I don't think he has very much left. I do think I'm sort of open to your argument that it's almost the Urkel kind of politicking, where he's just, oh no, did I do that? All these things are just happening around him, and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, guys, this just happened. And
like exactly what Martin said, like the ability to keep his hands clean, right? And Morné, you said if we take that away from him, we can't, right? All of these are strengths that a politician ought to have, being adored by the media. These are good things that you want as a politician, being amenable to business leaders, and all these are strengths that we cannot take. We can't. They are a part of him. These are things that he has, and these are strengths that he has in his arsenal. The fact that, and by the way, Mr. Zuma was arrested after he was no longer president of the ANC, after he was pretty much no longer president of the country too, right? Ramaphosa won conference against a faction that was supported by Mr. Zuma openly, right? Like that was against the faction that Mr. Zuma was campaigning for. Of course, Mr. Zuma's faction would be like, Mr. Ramaphosa bought the entire conference, but ANC buying votes is pretty much a normal thing, I think. And so I find it to be a disingenuous thing. It would be like, oh no, Mr. Ramaphosa bought votes. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure Mr. Zuma has maybe sanctioned at the very least, right? But yeah, so to me, right, his ability, all of these things, like Morné, as you said, he seems to be pretty much made in the lab to appeal to a News 24 news reporter, and like, yeah, there's a precedent, right? That is the strength that cannot be taken away from him. That like we cannot strip that away from him. And the fact that he has it and other politicians don't, is a strength of his. But the whole point I'm making is that we should never make the mistake of underestimating him, which I think a lot of his political opponents have done. I think this is what Mr. Zuma did, as the great political tactician that he is. Mr. Zuma, as you said, Morné, he still has the biggest party even after he was dealt with, right? So what really is the dealing with him that happened? But even he underestimated him, and he had to find out in a not so nice way, right? I'm sure he does not like no longer being in the ANC, having served in the ANC for such a long time and in like critical moments there. I think it is genuine, like from him at the very least, when he says he's still an ANC member, and the fact that he was outmaneuvered by this guy who he probably did not even think could just do that to him, because he made him vice president, right? He probably made him vice president because he probably thought, I don't think he will do to me what I did to Mr. Mbeki, and he did him super dirty. And like, yeah, I think we should keep that in mind. The man is capable. Is capable, even though we may call him Ramaphosa, like he is capable.
Yeah, you can be a Mampara and you can be capable at the same time. But yeah, I mean, I think that's not underestimating Ramaphosa. I think is a good place to end off this part of the discussion. I think our politics has been kind of a series of not only underestimating but also overestimating. And then for me, it's always been a process of overestimating what the DA can do and what the DA wants to do. And I think that we'll have healthier politics if we stop underestimating. I mean, people said Zuma was stupid, you don't have to worry, and kind of Ramaphosa is kind of weak, but then lockdown, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, he kind of closed the country just by standing in a PEP military uniform on TV. So don't underestimate the left, and do not overestimate the right, or the so-called right, because then you create a misapprehension of what is possible in our politics. But I think let's spend the last, we don't have a lot of time, but the last 20 or so minutes, maybe just casting our gaze back across the Atlantic again. Because the last 24 hours, I guess, the last 48 hours have been very eventful. I think there's broadly kind of three things that happen. I think two of those are somewhat interesting. The first thing I think was that Donald Trump imposed general sanctions on countries that the US has trade deficits with. That's kind of how I understand it. I'll let Morné
Not
kind of elaborate on that in a
tariffs,
moment.
not
But
sanctions.
and then
Tariffs,
and then the other thing
not
is
sanctions.
and then the other thing is, oh, did I say sanctions? Oh God, no, tariffs, protectionism, not sanctions. The other thing is sanctions. One member of the House of Representatives has introduced a bill that I don't think is quite as radical as imposing targeted sanctions on members of the ANC, but it does enable the government to do that. It's about reviewing the bilateral relationship between the US and South Africa, various kind of things there about trade and so on, but also I think the key thing is that it very explicitly mentions that the U.S. government must consider targeted sanctions against high-placed ANC and government officials. So the government doesn't just consist of ANC members, and I want some of the other people in government to hear me saying this, to consider their next steps, and then also. The bill, I'm always fascinated with how the Americans write their legislation, but basically the first half of that bill is about just the congressman explaining why the ANC is such a terrible thing, and he explains specifically in relation to South Africa's relationship with Israel, the kind of conduct of the government after right after October 7th, 2023. So I don't know why that's in legislation, but it's in there. And then the last thing is another piece of legislation that was by another member of the House of Representatives. It's called the Afrikaner Act or the Afrikaners Act. I'm not sure. And it kind of seeks to clarify Donald Trump's refugee kind of tweet, I guess, executive order that he did a few months ago, and yeah, I
did
find
it
that to be
clarify?
relatively sorry. Do
And has it now been clarified? Is it clear?
I think it's not been adopted, so it still has to go through the legislative process. I'm sure it'll be amended, so it hasn't then in that sense clarified anything. But yeah, it's I think it says that racial minorities, specifically Caucasians, that have been targeted or are at risk of being targeted for political reasons, would have a faster pathway to refugee status in the US. That's kind of my quick interpretation of it. I don't think that's a terribly interesting piece of legislation. I've always assumed that refugee status is something that anyone who can prove that they're being targeted can apply for. So this is just kind of a fast track, kind of greasing the wheels process, and I'm not terribly sure that very large numbers of people are gonna use it. But Morné, if you wanna just kind of kick us off with what the tariff thing is, I'm not an expert on trade and so on, so lead us in this discussion.
Okay. Neither is the US president. So
Pretty much.
Well,
Yeah.
I know that at least.
no. Yeah, just to get everybody, just to catch everybody up, the 2nd of April is now officially Liberation Day in the US, according to the current US president. And by liberation, I'm not sure what he means. They've been liberated from low prices. No, I actually think there is a larger discussion here to be had. And I think it is actually, it does warrant a bigger talk, because on the one hand, yes, definitely, you shouldn't be in favor of tariffs. Tariffs are taxes, basically. Tariffs are the worst form of taxes. Well, one of the worst forms of taxes. They basically, and I mean, just to explain shortly, it just means basically that whenever somebody imports something, whenever a US citizen imports something from another country, they have to pay an additional anywhere between 30% to, I mean, some of them go up to absolutely ridiculous percentages just to get that particular product in. Now, the fact is that this, normally when people think about this, they only think about the final goods. They only think that about, you know, the already made car. Should we get cars from another place, or should we build cars in our own country? But the fact is that even if you are building a car in your own country, you don't have all the parts that you need to build that car. So you're going to get, you know, rubber from this country, and you get steel from another country, and you're going to get a semiconductor from another country, and so forth and so forth and so on and so on, and glass from another place, and paint from another place. And all of those inputs can be subject to import duties or to tariffs. And yeah, that's basically what the Trump administration has done at this point, is they've made these broad, sweeping, what they call reciprocal tariffs. Not always sure what they're reciprocating. But the fact is that, yeah, they've done that for, as far as I can tell, just about the entire world, including the Faroe Islands. So sorry, Martin,
Yeah.
you're
Sorry,
going to
man.
be subject to tariffs there.
Even things happen in the Faroe Islands.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that the one point is that obviously increases prices for everybody, also increases prices for producers in your country, because all those imports become more expensive. And it increases prices by having a tax in place. Now, the other fact of the matter is that just about every country has them. Just about everybody has these. South Africa has these. So for all you want, you can say that it's ridiculous, but there's no country that has, you know, decided that they're not going to have any import tariffs or any import duties on foreign trade and on imports. So you can cry all you want about it, but the fact is that despite the fact that everybody agrees they're terrible, everybody also does them. Now, what I think does make the discussion more interesting is that I do think that there is between Trump and between his two main economic advisors. On the one hand, Scott Bessent, and on the other hand, what's the guy's name? Myson, I'm entirely sure. Scott Myson, I think. No, Scott Bessent, and let me get his name. What's the guy's name? Scott Bessent and Stephen Myron. Stephen Myron is the National Economic Advisor, and Scott Bessent, the head of the Treasury in the US. Now, they have actually been publishing quite a few technical documents on why it is that they're implementing these tariffs, and I think there's quite a bit of interesting stuff there. It certainly isn't tariffs just for tariff's sake. They are hoping to
engineer the economy.
Well, they're hoping to reorient global trade and reorient the entire global. It's the same thing you saw in the 80s with Reagan, and post World War II with Roosevelt and Truman. I think that Trump and his two advisors are working at the level of Bretton Woods and working at the level of free trade and neoliberal economics. That's the kind of changes they're hoping to bring about, and these do seem like the kind of things that they're putting in place to actually affect something great. So it's not not great as in something very big, very large, a large magnitude, not great necessarily as in it's going to be great. But it is going to be quite clearly a place where your alignment vis-a-vis the US is severely going to affect the extent to which they're open for economic cooperation with you. They are very much moving towards a situation where you're either favored, you're neutral, or you're against us. And that's why in South Africa, and that's where the second piece of legislation also becomes relevant, is it's not going to be the case that the US will simply, be favorable or work favorably for less developed countries with the hope that you'll become more aligned. They're sort of saying, no, become more aligned, then we'll give you certain favors. And that's the position that South Africa is in now. I think of those three categories, we are increasingly in the enemy side and not just on the neutral side. We've never really been pro the US much. We've sort of tried to be neutral, but I think that particularly if you look at that sanctions document, Martin, and you mentioned the fact that I think it's 15 pages in total, and the first 10 pages are just accusations. Well, not accusations. Some of those are quite clear facts of things that the ANC has done that upset the US or US interests in some way. So I think it's going to become what we do vis-a-vis our foreign policy in particular is going to become increasingly important for trade generally and for trade with the largest market in the world in particular.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks,
yeah.
Morné. Yeah, I think we're all free trade absolutists here. But yeah, I think to some degree you can understand the sentiment. I think there's very little debate on that free trade is gonna kick your butt economically, and it's gonna make things more expensive for Americans, and it's a bad thing, and it shouldn't even be on the menu of available government policy, as far as I'm concerned. But on the other hand, you do have the sense that given that we live in a world where there is no free trade, even though everyone is a member of the World Trade Organization and everyone
That is why there's no free trade.
No, well, I mean, everyone signed these treaties saying that in principle we agree with free trade, but then they go away and they say, no, but we have the protocols which give us these exceptions, and we're like, it's protectionist hell. And given that reality, I see the logic in the Americans saying that, listen, the old model of kind of the Francis Fukuyama idea of essentially people are going to become Western at some point, and for a long time there was this idea that the People's Republic of China in time is going to democratize and become this liberal utopia because they've enjoyed the benefits of free trade and open kind of commerce and so on. I think that thesis is either disproven or being disproven. And I think the MAGA movement has at least to some degree, for all its faults, and they have many more faults than they have virtues, they have recognized that actually this isn't going to work. So if you want to be on our good side as far as U.S. government policy is concerned, you have to actually like us, and we need to like you back. Then we can have a discussion. So that makes sense to me in the logic, in the bad logic of the system that we're sat with, and I would like nothing more than for it to change, but it does make sense to me, and I think that in that context, if the South African government has this pretension to caring about the public interest of South Africans, what it needs to do is to get on the US's good side, not by being a pushover, but I think Franz Cornier makes this point very well on the shows that he goes on, is to say that the Americans will tolerate a lot of bad mouthing and so on, just don't take tangible actions that threaten our interests. Like you can say we're bad, we're terrible, we're imperialists. You can have good relations with the Iranians. You can go to their birthday parties and so on. It's fine. Just don't do anything more than that. Don't let the Lady R dock in Simonstown. Don't do stuff like that. Do not take Israel to the ICJ. Do not do those things because you have a right to do those things, but we don't have to then play nice with you because those are our allies, those are our friends. We're not going to play that game with you. Yeah, so that's kind of my take. Jakes, I guess we'll give you
Yeah,
the last
I
word. We
mean,
have 5 minutes.
I thought free trade is important to me, and I think like even though I understand right the logic, the bad logic of the MAGA movement, it is horribly bad, and like this cannot be overstated. Morné, I think you're correct in that like Trump is trying to reorient how the world in a global sense understands trade, and I think Trump's not an original idea. The Chinese have been really doing it secretly because the Chinese are about that. If there's anything that Deng has left with them, is that just move very secretly because the Chinese markets, for all its greatness, is very protected, right? So high import tariff rates and everything. They have indigenization laws in China. That is why the moment Tesla was allowed in the Chinese markets, the Chinese in a couple of years developed a EV industry, right? Thanks to thank you Tesla for that. And there's a guy I know who's actually opposed to, US capital or Western capital going to places like China. But I don't think it's a generally new idea. It is bad. It is horrible because like the Chinese are finding out, it makes you, even though you appear to be stronger, in the long run, you're weak. The arguments from the days of the British Corn Laws and when the speech was given, free trade works not because there's a person losing, like it worked. It will shock the Americans, and this is why like I don't get right these MAGA people. It's because like tariffs hurt you, right? Like why is it a bad thing that other people are paying more expensive things for their stuff and you paying cheaper things? It's okay. It's okay. And like this is a deliberate attempt, at least by sitting US presidents, to like erode the living standards of Americans. One of the reasons why the American market is big and so successful is because Americans can purchase goods from across the world at relatively cheap rates, which contributes. Like, man, tariffs are bad. I don't see like even the whole they do it to me does not make sense. They are sensible people in the US, and I'm afraid that there aren't a lot of them left because even people who will be libertarians, right? They're doing it too. Then let's do it. Let's reciprocate. I'm like, nah, you dumb. Let them do it. Let them have 100% tariffs on your goods for all you care. You just still get to enjoy cheaper stuff. Like, man, that to me does not make sense. But it's okay. That's what the US wants to do. It's unfortunate, of course, because it will have implications on the trade prospects of other countries. But I still believe in free trade, right? If a country imposes tariffs on you, you can just continue trading relatively freer. And Morné, you mentioned that no one adheres to free trade. I'm like, it can get worse, and the US is making it worse. It is making it worse. So like this idea that everyone does it, so we might as well do it. Like no, not everyone does it to the degree of 45%. in like imports from poor Lesotho. I don't think they even know Lesotho. Like, man, they are a non-existent economy. Half of the Lesotho population is in South Africa, but it is, I am sure in their technical documents coming from Treasury, it makes sense. It makes sense. It was going to benefit the American economy. It is social engineering. It is like we are seeing a reorientation of the American culture concerning how an economy is supposed to be run. From, hey, you allow things to be free and you will be rich, to no, we plan things. We are going to do this and it will create these results, and these results will create good things. And everyone, conservatives, Republicans, Tea Party people are like, it's okay, it's good, good. Yay, Mr. President. Yay, Mr. President. And then to me, that is absurd, of course. And then with the legislation, right? I usually don't like speaking about legislation that is still gonna pass, because I don't think the prospects of it passing, particularly in the American legislative environment, is that high. But I don't like the idea of sanctions on anyone. I don't like the idea. I generally don't like what the American, because the American government, I've seen what them being involved in countries does to them. After America has a sight on you, you aren't better off afterwards. No country that has had any law that was passed by a U.S. government or a U.S. legislature that said, "Hey, we're gonna fix things. You better fix things, or else." That country did not end up better off. And to me, that's man.
Japan,
It is a very
Germany,
so wait, Japan.
Eastern
No,
Europe.
are you talking about the country that had two nuclear bombs dropped on them? Cool. So great that happened. And I'm saying, and like that is the cost of U.S. involvement. I'll never be in support of that, because to me, I have no other home but this beautiful, beautiful home of mine. I unfortunately don't have a piece of legislation that currently in the U.S. Senate that gives me special refugee status for me to move away should the US government decide to set a sight on me. I'm not Caucasian, right? So yeah, the US Senate won't give me speedy refugee status in that regard. So I'll never be like both of those pieces of legislation. I find them, man. But yeah, I'm not in favor of any foreign intervention by the US. I'm in favor of the libertarians who used to exist in the US, who are like, let's not get involved in stuff, let's just stay home. Of course, yeah, Martin does not like those libertarians, but yeah, I prefer those libertarians. I prefer countries not getting involved, particularly in my this is a personal instance. I don't want the US getting involved where I live, because nothing good ever comes out after the US is involved where you live. But yeah, that is my take on it. Free trade, good. Everything else,
Yeah, no, I think there's many rabbit holes that we can descend into here, but our time is unfortunately up. I think the message that I think we should leave listeners with is that we have the benefit of our ideas, I think, always having worked. I think it's very rare, at least on a policy level. I think that liberalism has some moral implications that are sometimes a bit tough for societies to adapt to. But as far as policy is concerned, it has always produced unparalleled prosperity for everyone. It has made societies happier, free trade, individual liberty, open commerce, and so on. And I think that what we're seeing around the world, from the left and the right, the right is a new, an old contender, but it's been absent for a while. It's back now. From both the left and the right, the idea that no, we'll do interventionism, economic interventionism, Jake. We'll do it right this time, and that
all
they're going to be
interventionism is bad.
they're going to be sorely mistaken on that score. It's going to hurt the Americans. It's not going to hurt them as much as it's going to hurt others, but it will hurt them. And I think that in the long run, and not even that long run, I think that ultimately you'll have a default back to freedom. I think that the fact that in the last 2 centuries ish, we have proven so firmly and beyond any reasonable doubt that free trade works, and it works majestically, and that freedom produces all the nice things that we want, and maybe that the political class doesn't want, but that the masses generally want. I think that is generally irresistible. There will be a lot of resistance, and that's maybe what Fukuyama got wrong. There will be resistance. You have to account for that, and this is where I like other forms of interventionism. You have to account for that resistance, but ultimately the logic that we have discovered as a species, as humanity, we have discovered the final real answer to political organization, and that is freedom. I think that is an irresistible hypothesis. Well, yeah, I say irresistible. It will be resisted, but it's the tide will be against the people who resist it, and that I think is something we can find a lot of solace in. There will be blips of resistance against freedom, but freedom will win out ultimately, and that's something that makes me positive in the long run. And yeah, that's it from my side. And Morné, if you have any closing words before I do the formal closing.
Viva libertad, carajo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Viva. Cool. So yes, thank you everyone for joining us. We had a good crowd of live watchers again. Thank you all for being here. We hope you've been enjoying these Rational Standard shows. We're creeping closer to a formal announcement for you all about what this Rational Standard thing is, and you'll be hearing about that very soon. Thank you for all the engagement in the comments today. Just kind of a call to future listeners. I know many of you enjoy watching the show over the weekend. Please engage. Please join us live if you have time. But otherwise, leave us some comments, and we make a point of reading all comments left. Please like this video. Please share with your friends on social media, and above all, please do subscribe to the Rational Standard channel and click the bell icon to ensure that you get notifications when we upload our standard Friday discussions. But yeah, I think that's it. It's rainy here in the north of the country. I hope it stays that way for a while still. So if you're enjoying the weather, I'm glad. And yeah, that's it from us. Go well, and we will see you again next week. Cheerio.
All right.